All right, I would like to welcome everybody to our March virtual lunch and learn for the Maine GIS users group. We're going to be talking about a couple of new master's degree options that are either hitting the books next year or coming down the pipeline, and whatever the case may be, here in the University of Maine system. These are going to be things that are related in some sense to geographic information systems in various ways. So I'm going to introduce our two speakers today. One is, these are both colleagues of mine as I'm a professor in the University of Maine system. So Kati Corlew is Associate Professor of Psychology at the University of Maine at Augusta, and Matt McCourt is Associate Professor of Geography at the University of Maine at Farmington. I am your moderator, Matt Doobie. I'm the Vice Chair of the Maine GIS User Group. I'm also a faculty member in the UMaine system in computer information systems. The Maine GIS Users Group is a professional organization within the state that promotes geospatial occupations and furthering our field. Over the past couple of years, we've had a lot of issues with having in-person events, obviously, as most people have around the state in various capacities. But we're excited that coming in May here, we're anticipating having an in-person event down in Brunswick, drone mini conference. So hope that some of you may be interested in that. We put on things that have to do with professional development, education, all kinds of different things that generally promote geospatial technologies, geospatial thought, geographic thought in our broader professional community. We can get involved in many, or you can get involved in many ways with MEGUG. You can attend an event like this one. You could present your work at any sort of stage like Kati and Matt are doing here today. You could become a member of MEGUG in different levels of that, whether it's a corporate sponsorship or individual memberships or the student memberships, things like that. You can serve on a committee or a working group, or you could even run for our board, like some of the people here on the panel have been in the past or are working with other organizations in the state. So we have a few graphics here of some of our sponsors for events like this, the Sewell Corporation, Blue Marble, Geographics, Esri, groups like that. We have many committees and working groups for things that people may be interested in, such as education, at all levels, K-12, post-secondary, professional education, things like that, membership, recruitment, those sorts of things, program committees, which I chair about having different user conferences, lunch and learns like this, publicity, sponsorship, finance, and things about bylaws and policies. The general point is that as GIS professionals, we should be contributing to our profession. So this is essentially the role of our organization across the state. Our board, you can see, comes from all over the place. There are different corporations that are represented on our board, different educational institutions, different municipal organizations as well. So we have a fairly diverse set of places where these people are coming from. Always the diversity of ideas and thoughts is important for these things to make a better organization and a better look at our profession. Our upcoming events, we have grant and scholarship opportunities for students and educators. Actually, Matt was part of working on some of that in the past for making some of those things happen. The drone mini conference that I mentioned, May 11th in Brunswick, it should be in the afternoon. There is a call for proposals or call for papers out to the MEGUG listserv and other various organizations around the state about that. If you're interested in those things, I can throw information about that in the chat as our two presenters are talking. I'll do that. And we are planning a poster contest for Maine University and college students for the fall semester to correspond with World GIS Day, so that we can promote geographic intelligence in our communities. So for those of you who are on the education sort of side of the house, this is something that can be useful for you in coursework if you would like. And as always, I'm looking for people to be lunch and learn presenters like Matt and Kati here. So that work could be at any stage of development possible. It could be something I've done talks about research I've done, but there could be things that you're working on this project. You're looking for ideas. You'll see a flavor of some of that today. you'll also see things that are more developed, different ways of looking at that. So we have social media accounts. So our MEGUG Virtual Lunch and Learn show up in a YouTube list that users can, or not users, members or general public can get to. We have a Twitter account, we have a Facebook account, we have LinkedIn, and you can see the email for our board down there in the bottom right and our website in the bottom left. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie and Matt, however they want to do this. I'm going to stop my sharing so that they can take control of that. I think Katie's going to go first, is my understanding, and I'll let you guys take it from there.
Hey everyone, I probably am not going to be sharing my screen, so you just get to look at me and my home office. So I guess to start, I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. I am a psychologist, but one of my areas of expertise is the psychology of disaster and climate change. And that is an area that is confusing to a lot of people because we tend to think of climate change, especially in terms of what is happening to the physical environment. However, it is largely driven by human activities, human decisions. It impacts us because we live here. And, when we're making decisions about how we are going to be planning, changing policies, things like that, that's also going to be driven by humans and the way that we understand things. I think it's a little bit easier to understand the psychology of disaster. When communities are hit by a disaster, very obviously they're going to be, experiencing upheaval, sometimes extensive trauma, sometimes just minor changes in their society. And of course, the folks who are responding to the disaster are human people. And so, they've been planning, they've been creating preparedness, they've hopefully been working with their community in order to, create strategic plans for the disaster preparedness. And, so it's a very human-centric field as well, even when we're talking about natural disasters and even when we're talking about technological disasters. So this leads me to what I'm talking about today, which is the Trauma-Informed Emergency Management Graduate Program. This is a program that is based at the University of Maine at Augusta. However, we have faculty from across the entire University of Maine system. So it's a very, kind of like broad program in that sense. Students will always be registering through UMA, but we have faculty at Farmington, at GIS, at Fort Kent, at USM. So courses will be offered through those universities, but we kind of direct them through a UMA place. This is the first emergency management graduate program in the state of Maine. And as far as we're able to tell, it's the only graduate program in emergency management in the United States that is focused on a trauma-informed perspective. Now, the idea behind that is when people are experiencing an emergency, a disaster, when they're in the recovery process, so the longer term sorts of activities to rebuild a society, people experience trauma. We behave differently in emergency situations than we do when we're just in our day-to-day activities. Let me go ahead and I'll share a link to our webpage. It's pretty basic right now, though we are hoping to, I should say, I will be updating it in the next month to include a lot more information, but you can go ahead and take a look at it there. But trauma is not the only part of emergency management. There are other components of this field in terms of being able to prepare communities, individuals, industries, etc., for emergencies, for disasters, the response to disasters as they are happening, and coordinating all of the different logistics that go into any sort of community-wide response. And then the longer term recovery, which kind of loops back into, preparing for future disasters beyond what has just been experienced. So emergency management as a field, I found that a lot of people aren't super familiar with it. And it's kind of a good thing because that means that, you know, it's functioning in the background, it's there, it's active, it's doing its job so that other people don't have to worry about it. But it also means that, you know, folks are not necessarily aware of all of the resources and activities that are going on to keep us safe from disasters as they arrive. So emergency management as a field is going to be folks who are particularly focused on preparing communities, states, countries for inevitable emergencies that are going to happen. So we can predict that there are going to be certain types of natural disasters that hit our community. We can project that it's likely at some point we're going to have other types of emergencies that hit the community. So a couple of years ago, we had like a pretty big explosion in a town in Maine. You know, there might be forest fires. We don't get them here quite so bad as other parts of the country, but you know, these things do happen. We have flooding events, and there might be like technological emergencies as well. I am on the UMA Bangor campus, and as part of our conversations about, you know, emergency preparedness at, you know, a college in Maine. So obviously we're going to be talking about the possibility of a school shooting situation. I am hopeful that that will not ever happen, but that's one of the things that we have to be prepared for and have a plan in place. Also, the Bangor campus is right across the street from the airport. So what happens if, you know, God forbid there's an airplane crash near or even on our campus? These are the sorts of things that emergency managers are going to be thinking about. So within the field, we'll have folks who are like their job title and description is emergency manager. They might work for FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration. In Maine, they might work with MEMA, which is the Maine Emergency Management Agency. We also have regional EMAs for each county, so that's regional emergency management agencies. And then even more local, each town will have a emergency manager. Typically in Maine, they are serving a dual role. So it'll be like the police chief or the fire chief or someone who would already be active in emergencies who will step up into that role. If there is a big kind of community-wide event, that person will then coordinate all of the different logistics that go into that, you know, getting hospitals on board and, you know, different community agencies that know how to respond to different folks. But as you're probably realizing, like part of that logistic of preparing a community as well as, you know, responding to something that's happening, that involves people from like every sector of society. And so while we wouldn't have the term emergency manager necessarily at different for-profit businesses or industries or at schools or, you know, city planning or hospitals, we do have folks who work with emergency planning. Like they do that as part of their job to make sure that, you know, their community, their business, their organization, the constituents that they work with are prepared if something happens. And if something happens, they know what to do to make sure the resources are getting to where they need to go. So emergency management as a field is very interdisciplinary. And that's what this program is really grounded in. The way that it's structured is every student who comes into this graduate program will take a core set of courses that are going to be generally interesting and you know, knowledge that folks are going to need to have. And this will give everyone kind of an introduction at the least to all of these different moving parts in emergency management. So whether folks are going to eventually wind up focusing in GIS and data analytics, or if they are in the mental health care profession and they're trying to develop, you know, their emergency management chops with the community, the population that they work with, everyone's going to get an overview of all of these different things. Then we have the students will break into concentrations where they'll take additional courses, really narrowing in their area of expertise to, you know, the area that they're working in. So we have our community resilience concentration, and this is going to be largely focused on, folks who are working with different community populations. These might be people who work in nonprofits or for-profits, businesses, things like that. Maybe they work in schools. We have our emergency management and preparedness concentration, which is for folks who want to be, more like the emergency manager job title. We have the mental health concentration, which is going to be focused on folks who are working with like that mental health kind of trauma that can come along with emergencies. And then specifically relevant here is the data analytics concentration. And this is really focused in on making sure that folks who have this amazing amount of knowledge about how data works and how it can be used and how it can be applied, how it can be communicated, are also knowledgeable about how this can be utilized in an emergency situation. So, for example, the Penobscot County Emergency Management Agency has just hired or is hiring still a GIS specialist to work in their office. And they'll be mapping all kinds of different variables in our community to make sure that we have an idea of where risks are, where different resources and assets are, how we can build and structure those if different types of emergencies happen, what might be the infrastructure that is most at risk, et cetera, et cetera. The city of Portland, I had a great presentation in one of my classes in the fall from the GIS specialist for the city of Portland, who did this really incredible mapping process, looking at all of the different areas that are vulnerable for flooding based on both historic trends as well as what we might see in future years with climate change and sea level rise. So there's a lot of really cool stuff like that that our GIS and other data analytics specialists will be looking at. And so the types of courses that we have in our data analytics concentration are, GIS, we have data mining, we have spatiotemporal information science, we have data visualization, we have remote sensing and image analysis, and geosensor networks. So there's a lot of different types of knowledge that's going to go in there. And learning this in the context of this emergency management program is going to give the folks who are working with this data a good sense of, okay, here's a thing that I know. I have this great amount of knowledge in GIS and other sorts of data analytics. I also know now how it can be applied to all of these okay, I'll check on that in a second, to all of these different areas that I know folks are going to need to be able to communicate, to prepare for emergencies, to prepare for, increasing our capacity against various vulnerabilities we might have with our infrastructure, our communities, and and know how to work with the other folks who are going to be in the field. So yes, we have currently a graduate certificate in trauma-informed emergency management. This launched just this past fall. So this is 16 to 18 credits of graduate courses that students would take, again, starting with the core courses and then narrowing into a concentration. And unfortunately, I can't officially announce that we are going to have a master's program launching in the fall because of bureaucracy. So I'm just going to have to secretly let you know we have a master's program that is launching in the fall. And so this is going to be 30 credits of graduate courses in programming. Again, still working with that, those core courses that everybody takes, followed by the concentration, as well as a capstone where students will actually get to apply this knowledge in the field to benefit community members and community agencies while they are still, students. So yeah, don't tell anyone, tell everyone because it's going to be announced. I was hoping that we'd have the official okay by today, but unfortunately bureaucracy is still happening. So I think I can close it there. I saw there's a question about who in the Portland office. And so let me pull that up, but also I'm going to get a link to the project that he was working on, because there's things that are available that folks can just look at. So Kevin Denault, and I'll find the link to his project and share it with you in a few minutes. I'll put it in the chat for everybody.
All right, thank you, Katie. If anybody has questions for Katie, please send them in the chat. I'll let Matt take over for now, and I'll moderate questions at the end. So go ahead, Matt.
So I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with MEGUG and others, and I'm gonna try to put you to work for us, giving us some input about ideas that you might have for a professional master's in GIS, a MGIS degree that we're developing and designing through Maine Geospatial Institute. So let me just say a few things. I think many people probably will know about MGI because we've had such a good relationship with MEGUG in the past. But for those who don't, Maine Geospatial Institute is a collaboration amongst all of the 7 campuses, or I should say the 7 of the campuses in the UMaine system. It builds on and grows out of collaboration that's been in place for decades, really long before I was at University of Maine at Farmington, where I teach in geography and environmental planning. And the premise, I think, just broadly, is that these geospatially oriented faculty are going to be much stronger when we can work together and can work kind of across our campus homes than we would be if we were siloed. And that's been borne out through a bunch of research funding opportunities and curriculum alignment, and a lot of kind of mutual support across different campuses. And I'll kind of talk a little bit more about how that works in a moment. So we kind of envision for the UMaine system this multifaceted role in geospatial learning, kind of across the lifespan, or at least building out so that we can support geospatial learning at all these different points. Many of these areas are already kind of robust and built out. We have a variety of undergraduate majors and minors and certificates and new initiatives around micro-credentialing, badges. We have really robust master's, MS degree, and PhD in spatial informatics at University of Maine, which has a particular orientation and just a really kind of robust and important history in the state, and continues to do really important work. And then we want to think about going forward the ways that the system can support K-12 initiatives, which is often done through our partnership with the Maine Geographic Alliance. Also CTE technical schools, some of which are really interested in building out geospatial curriculum. But maybe most importantly for what we're thinking about today is a professional master's that's very much oriented towards potentially, existing GIS professionals who are looking to refresh skills, are looking to kind of potentially move from maybe allied professions into these categories of geospatial professionals. We're seeing that there's a gap that we can serve in between the undergraduate programs that we have and these built out and advanced programs at UMaine in spatial informatics. So that's what we're thinking about right now. And there's a variety of ways of thinking about that. And so just as an example, as like a potential model for how we might develop across the system a professional master's degree, I just want to use another credential as a kind of model. And this credential is a GIS minor that was just developed at UMaine Farmington. But what's important about that GIS minor is that it contains a core set of classes that are UMF classes, but then it includes also a set of, it maps in our catalog a set of geospatial competency courses that would be available in some cases at other campuses. So we would, in other words, help students, our students, understand the opportunities they might have at other campuses, and many of our students, take advantage of those in order to access geospatial learning that we wouldn't at UMF support alone. And so that's the nature of this GIS minor program and curriculum. If we sort of drill down a little bit further, it has specializations. For instance, there's 3 right now that are kind of mapped with the intent to do more. But right now we've got a geospatial data science specialization that involves a mix of courses from UMF, from Matt at UMaine Augusta, and also UMaine courses, which are not officially on the books, but are in process. So that gives us the sense that there's at least one model out there of really a distributed professional master's program, similar potentially to the GIS minor at UMF, that would allow students, paths through their particular geospatial learning chosen path that would be more, I guess, than where the whole would be more than the sum of the parts if it was rooted solely at a specific campus or collection of campuses. So right now we've done a lot of kind of background research, mapping, looking at who student audiences are and who the competition would be for different kinds of GIS master's programs, kind of tracking those trends in terms of completions. We're looking, of course, at programs like Penn State, University of Southern California, and others, and then considering as well the variety of ways those programs deliver professional master's curriculum. So in the case of Penn State, there's a series of 5 10-week terms that run continuously throughout the year. University of Southern California is more likely to show 14-week semesters, a more traditional structure. One of the big questions for us that we've been pondering is what format would be most useful, most effective for reaching the biggest audience of potential students from Maine and beyond that would be interested in this niche of a professional master's program. So that's a big consideration and a key question that we would love people to give their input on through an online a Google form that I'll share with you in just a moment. The other important question for us is the kinds of content that are most in demand, that are most needed across, an audience like MEGUG. So we would be really interested to hear people's input on a variety of different competencies and content areas, and to help us prioritize the rollout and delivery, and frankly, the shape of a professional master's program. You can see that in the case of Penn State's program, there's an emphasis on project management. There's an emphasis on analysis and database concepts, implementation, and some visualization. So I think that's important. And I think with that, I'm going to end this particular show. And I'll, yeah, this is a great question from Kathleen about really the modality. And that's certainly an important consideration. Let me just flash over and I'll show you where I will ask you guys to help us answer that question.
Matt, we published this video as well on our YouTube channel. So I will also make sure that the link to this survey ends up there too, because that will help, I think, a lot with that too.
Great. So that's great. So now I'm putting in the chat a link to a very simple Google form that asks people about these two big categories of question. What are the most important competencies that would be needed to be covered in a professional master's in GIS program? Of course, that ranges from desktop to visualization to database, data management, project management, mobile data collection, spatial analysis. There's a range there, and we're just looking for kind of your Likert responses. What's very important, what's least important amongst those options. The second question is really the one that brings up the issue that Kathleen Myers raised in the chat. Right now, the most effective shared curriculum that we have is curriculum that is synchronous online or potentially asynchronous. That's a big question for us going forward. I think it was certainly our intention to reach the broadest possible audience of professionals and others who would be in the workforce. So we would be, I think, kind of presuming that would have to be offered in probably a variety of modalities, but including asynchronous online options. But that is a question. Oh, sorry, are you not able to see? Andy's asking me to repeat the question. And so let me just say that question, Andy, was, will the master's program be remote online? And my response was, that's my expectation, but the exact form that takes is also a question for this audience.
Katie, I think that's a relevant question for you too.
Yes, our graduate program is online as well. So yeah, we have students across the state of Maine as well as out of state. So yeah, thank you for asking about that.
Actually, I'll throw a question out here to get this started, and I think this is probably important for both of you. So I'll let you handle it how you want. So just before we actually started this, Matt and I actually ended up in a conversation about something else, which was the idea about consolidated curriculum. So the idea of having topics that have something to do with each other thrown together in one spot in like one standalone course. So like for most of the people on this video, thinking about like a GIS course, having aspects of like cartographic generalization, a little bit of like database querying, a little bit of cartography, things like that all slammed together, versus having courses that are smaller that target one thing and one thing only, which are quicker to take up, essentially to upskill in different ways. I was wondering if you both had perspective about, would that make sense for your programs, or would that not make sense for your programs in the future?
Matt, do you want to go ahead?
Well, yeah, I mean, I do think it's an appealing option if we can like maintain a kind of coherence to a program to be able to disaggregate some of the semester-long 14-week experiences into 7-week experiences. I think, you know, it's possible, it's likely that you would want to maintain some room, some space for deeper engagements, you know, potentially with like project-based learning opportunities, individualized, maybe capstone experience. But I can also imagine, and I'm very interested in, the idea of let's say 4 to 8 week blocks of content or modules that that people can, to some extent, mix and match and find their own ways through. There's challenges for us, you know, in terms of our management structures and our workloads and so forth to implementing that. But it's been done in a smaller scale in a couple of programs, certainly at our campus at UMF, but elsewhere in the system as well. And it's been really successful, and it sustains. So those shorter chunks, I think, can be easier for professionals to stick with, you know, to sustain themselves through. But that's one of the key questions that we've put in the survey. So that's where we're really hoping that people can chime in.
Yeah, and I'd say for the TEM program, we have kind of a balance of that, because emergency management is so very interdisciplinary, and we are in fact trying to draw people from a lot of different fields into this program. And we want everyone to be aware of what are all of the other areas of knowledge and expertise that need to be at the table when we are looking at some sort of, like, you know, community-wide, statewide, you know, potential disaster event that might happen. So, you know, even if we have teachers or we have counselors who are not going to be working with data analytics, they need to know what data exists. They need to know what emergency managers are going to be thinking about and prioritizing. And vice versa, when folks are creating like data maps, when emergency managers are trying to, you know, coordinate all of these different agencies, they also need to know what other folks are thinking about, worrying about, prioritizing. So that's kind of like the idea behind the core courses. And some of them, I think, kind of necessarily get into these, you know, focusing on specialized knowledge, but also allowing people to come at it from different directions. We have research issues and data literacy and public management. And, you know, folks who are taking this course from outside of the TIM program are probably not going to be focusing their research, their projects, things like that on emergency management, but that's going to be really relevant for our students. We have a grant writing course. It's actually going to be taught this summer. And the students who are coming from the emergency management program to take this are going to be working with MEMA, with the Maine Emergency Management Agency, to write FEMA grants for our local EMAs to kind of help develop the capacity of our local agencies. They don't always have time to do this sort of thing themselves. So having, you know, some students who are learning the skills of grant writing in a general way, being able to apply that knowledge very specifically. Looking into our data analytics concentration specifically, I think I might defer to one of our professors in that concentration. Matt Doobie, do you have anything that you'd like to add about how that works in that specific concentration?
Yeah, so that's something that we focus on with our emergency management students and grad students as well. So there are grad students from all over that take courses like that. So grad students in biology may take a data mining course. So the way that our data mining course, our data visualization course are set up is that there are assessments that the students do together, but then they also have a project option, a project that they do at the end, particularly the graduate students do this, where they are able to apply those principles to the things they're actually studying in their broader graduate program. So for an emergency management student in a data visualization course, they may be thinking about how can I exploit the concept of network graphs, because this is going to model the flow of traffic, or it's going to model the how these different things relate to one another. And if one of these things is crippled, what happens to other things? So you can imagine the thought process that was probably going on around about March 2020, when you heard of a virus in a certain area and it's spreading to different parts of the world. How are you going to deal with that? So I remember pedagogically, the first time I taught sort of network science to biology students, actually, I got feedback from students that said this was worthless, so on and so forth. And then 3 months later, we end up in a lockdown. And I got messages back from those students who then said, thank you. Thank you for showing us this, because it literally explained everything that was happening in front of them. And that concept of networks really changes how you view interactions in a space. So that was something that oftentimes, I say that because oftentimes we'll have disciplinary blinders to certain things where, oh, I assume that bioinformatics is going to be all this high-powered statistical sort of thing looking for genetic sequences, when realistically there's genetic sequences that overlap with a mapping space like a geographer might think about, and that entirely changes how you think about epidemiology. So there are plenty of things where having the core knowledge of what, say, data mining looks like, or what, say, relational algebra looks like, or what data visualization looks like, then spearhead lots of other things. And one of the 1 to 3, we have one course in the TEM program that is the 1 to 3 credit course. So a student who may be on the more mental health side may be less concerned with the role of data in the general field of emergency management or public administration more broadly, but they still need to understand data literacy. On the other hand, if they go into data analytics, they're going to take that full-fledged course in the process. So I'll pose this question. So Katie, you got interested in climate change and disaster response and these sorts of things. And a lot of the folks that we probably have here as attendees are much more so from, or probably have been in the past, connected to things that may be more connected to Matter-I in terms of our academic upbringings. How did you get involved? How did you come to emergency management, given that your background is more in community psychology?
Yeah, that's a good question because it was very roundabout. I went to grad school in community psychology, believing that I was going to be working with at-risk youth for the rest of my life. And so that was what I was planning on studying. When I got to the University of Hawaii, within 3 months, there was this massive protest happening on one of the outer islands regarding, environmental justice, basically. And I wound up doing my master's thesis on that. And this was a case where folks who lived there were trying to stop this like massive ferry from coming over and bringing people in cars from other islands and invasive species and things like that. And so actually when the ferry arrived, because they hadn't been able to block it through political or economic means, they just jumped in the water and blocked the harbor with their bodies on surfboards and in canoes and things like that. So yeah, that was kind of a public emergency that had to be addressed pretty quickly. But also, looking at it from the other side, here's this, massive action of folks who are worried about, if we're bringing in invasive species, if we're changing the construction of the harbor. It's going to reduce our resiliency. And I got more and more interested in that, wound up working with climate change, and that led me into disasters because obviously there's an increase of disasters with climate change. So I got a graduate certificate in disaster management and humanitarian assistance and have worked in that field ever since.
There was a question that just came up. When do you expect the TEM Masters program to officially be announced?
Any day now. I'm holding my breath waiting for that official announcement. Yeah, it's gotten all of the approvals up to the Board of Trustees. So as Matt mentioned in the chat, that meeting is early next week. So I am hopeful that immediately thereafter I'll be able to officially say this thing that y'all don't know about yet because it's still in the works and it's not official yet, but secretly you know. So reach out to me if you have any questions about it.
So any parting shots from our panelists before we call this a wrap?
Well, I just say thanks. Again, I appreciate the chance to share. And so thanks to you, Matt, and thanks to MEGUG. And we're really looking forward to seeing what people have to say in terms of input about formats and content. And so if you could get in that form and fill that out, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'd also like to say thank you for bringing me here to talk about this. Yeah, GIS and other data science is really growing right now in emergency management fields. So this is definitely very much appreciated, and from the emergency managers that I've talked to in Maine, like it's a real priority to continue to grow this. So thank you for listening. Thank you for letting us be here, and reach out if you have any questions.
All right, so on behalf of MEGUG, I would like to thank our participants and our attendees here at our Lunch and Learn today. If you have any questions, please hit us up at our board email address, which you can see in our slides from earlier. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.